There are moments in television that transcend entertainment. Moments when the cameras capture something so raw, so human, that everyone watching forgets they're watching a show at all. Simon Cowell had been judging talent for 2 decades, and he thought he'd seen every kind of performance, every type of story. But on a cold November evening in London, a young man walked onto the Got Talent stage and proved him wrong. His name was Daniel Carter, and he was 24 years old. He had sandy brown hair that fell slightly over his forehead, wearing a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. Nothing about his appearance suggested what was coming. He looked like any other nervous contestant, hands fidgeting slightly as he walked to center stage. The audience applauded politely. Simon sat at the judges' table with his usual posture, arms crossed, expression neutral. The other judges chatted quietly. Everything felt routine. The host approached Daniel with a warm smile and a microphone. "Welcome to Britain's Got Talent. Tell us your name and where you're from." "Daniel Carter, I'm from Bristol. And what will you be performing for us today?" Daniel's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, his composure flickered. He looked down at his hands, then back up at the host. "I'm going to sing a song," he said quietly. "It was my brother's favorite." The word choice hung in the air. Was. Past tense. The host's smile became more gentle, recognizing the weight of that single word. "Tell us about your brother, Daniel." Daniel took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. A carefully controlled grief that threatened to break through at any moment. "His name was Alex. He was my twin brother. We did everything together our whole lives. We even applied to this show together 2 years ago." He paused. "We were supposed to audition together, but 3 months before our audition date, Alex was killed in a car accident." The audience went silent. The casual chatter at the judges' table stopped. Simon's arms slowly uncrossed. "He was 22, Daniel continued. "He was the talented one, the singer. I was just there to support him. But after he died, I couldn't let his dream die with him. So I learned to sing. I practiced every single day for 2 years. And I'm here now because he should be here. And in a way, I think he is." The host nodded, clearly moved. "Thank you for sharing that with us, Daniel. Whenever you're ready." As the host stepped back, Simon leaned forward slightly. Something about Daniel's stillness, the way he gripped the microphone, suggested this was going to be different. The backing track began. A soft piano melody filled the theater, melancholic and beautiful. Daniel closed his eyes, and for a moment, he seemed to be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere far from the cameras and the lights and the 2,000 watching eyes. Then he began to sing. His voice was untrained but honest. It carried the weight of someone singing not for applause but for someone who would never hear it. He sang a ballad about brothers, about promises kept, about love that survives even death. And as he sang, tears began streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't stop. He simply stood there and let the grief pour through the music. The audience sat in absolute silence. This wasn't a performance. This was something sacred. Something private being shared with the world. At the judges' table, Simon's expression changed completely. The professional mask cracked. His hand moved to his mouth, a gesture of someone trying to maintain composure while something inside them breaks. Daniel sang through the first verse, his voice breaking occasionally, not from lack of skill, but from the sheer weight of what he was carrying. He sang about childhood memories, about growing up as two halves of a whole, about what it feels like when that other half is suddenly, violently taken away. By the chorus, people in the audience were crying. The other judges had stopped pretending to take notes. They were simply watching, transfixed by the raw humanity unfolding before them. Daniel reached the second verse, and his voice grew stronger, as if his brother's memory was giving him strength. He sang about promises, about carrying someone's dreams when they can no longer carry them themselves. And in that moment, everyone in the theater understood that they weren't just witnessing a tribute. They were witnessing love in its purest form. Simon stood up, not slowly, not with hesitation. He stood up as if something inside him couldn't remain seated anymore. Without a word, he walked around the judges' table. The other judges turned to watch him, surprised. The audience held its breath. Daniel, lost in the song, his eyes closed, didn't see Simon approaching. Simon walked onto the stage and stopped a few feet from Daniel. He waited, not wanting to interrupt the performance, but needing to be closer to this moment. The cameras captured everything: the tears on Daniel's face, the unusual emotion on Simon's usually stoic features, the sacred space between grief and healing. Daniel opened his eyes as he reached the bridge of the song. That's when he saw Simon standing there. For a split second, panic crossed his face, thinking he'd done something wrong. But Simon simply shook his head slightly and gestured for him to continue. Daniel's voice wavered, overwhelmed by the gesture, but he pushed through. He sang the bridge, about how love doesn't end when life does, about how the people we lose live on in the choices we make, in the dreams we fulfill for them. And then Simon spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough that the microphones picked it up. "Your brother is singing with you." Daniel's voice broke completely. He stopped mid-phrase, covering his face with one hand, the microphone dropping to his side. His shoulders shook with sobs he'd been holding back for 2 years. Simon closed the distance between them and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The simple gesture said everything. "I see you. I understand. Your grief is valid. Your love is real." The audience erupted in applause, but Simon held up his hand, asking for silence. The theater quieted immediately. "Daniel," Simon said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. "Look at me." Daniel lowered his hand, tears still streaming down his face. "What you're doing right now, keeping your brother's dream alive, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen on this stage. But I need you to do something for me." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. "I need you to finish the song. Not for the audience, not for the judges, for Alex. Can you do that?" Daniel's face crumpled with fresh emotion, but he nodded again. Simon stepped back, but remained on stage. He turned to the sound engineer in the booth. "Start the music again." From the bridge, the backing track resumed. Daniel lifted the microphone with shaking hands. He looked at Simon, then out at the audience, then up toward the ceiling, as if looking toward something beyond the lights and the cameras. And he sang. This time his voice didn't break. It soared. Everything he'd held inside for 2 years, every moment of grief and love and loss, poured into the music. He sang about carrying his brother with him always, about how twins never really separate, even in death. He sang with a power that seemed impossible from someone who'd learned to sing only in the wake of tragedy. The final note rang out, pure and strong. Daniel held it, his voice unwavering, and when it finally faded, the silence that followed was profound. Then the theater exploded. 2,000 people rose as one, applauding, cheering, crying. The standing ovation was immediate and overwhelming. The other judges were on their feet, tears on their own faces. But Simon Cowell did something he'd done only a handful of times in 20 years. He walked to the golden buzzer and slammed his hand down on it. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling. The iconic music blared. The lights turned gold. Daniel collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed, his hands covering his face. Simon returned to him, knelt down beside him, and spoke quietly, away from the microphones. Whatever he said, only Daniel heard. But when Daniel looked up at Simon, there was something in his expression that went beyond gratitude. It was recognition. The recognition of someone who'd been seen, truly seen, in their darkest moment. Simon helped Daniel to his feet. The audience continued their ovation, wave after wave of appreciation that seemed endless. Daniel stood there, bathed in golden light and falling confetti, and for the first time since his brother's death, he smiled. Not a sad smile, not a forced smile, a real one. Later, after the cameras stopped rolling, Simon stayed with Daniel for over an hour. They talked about Alex, about grief, about what it means to carry someone's memory forward. Simon shared his own experiences with loss, things he'd never discussed on camera. It was a conversation between two people who understood that some pain never goes away. It just transforms into something you can carry. Before Daniel left the theater that night, Simon did something unusual. He gave Daniel his personal phone number. "When this airs," Simon said, "your life is going to change. You're going to get a lot of attention. Some of it will be good, some of it won't. If you need someone who understands what this journey is like, call me." Daniel's audition aired 6 weeks later and became one of the most watched moments in Got Talent history. But more importantly, it started a conversation about grief, about surviving loss, about what it means to honor those we've lost by living fully. Daniel went on to win that season of Britain's Got Talent. He donated half his prize money to a road safety charity in Alex's name. He recorded an album, and every song was dedicated to his brother. He spoke openly about grief, helping others who'd experienced similar losses. But the most powerful moment remained that night on stage when Simon Cowell, known for his harsh judgments and cutting remarks, showed the world